Do not fail to be surprised by the catching of your breath, the quickening of your heart, the fullness of your eyes, wide and suddenly awake with love. Here is the place filled with wonder, that still there might be something new born this day. Do not fail to notice the changing, the life full and abundant, already beginning by our coming together, already possible by the promises we make to give, to receive, to become more together, and to forgive again and again the falling short that is always here. Here we find ourselves among the courageous, feeling ourselves trying to become brave. With each in and out of breath, each word, each pause, each song, we give thanks to be on this journey. Come, let us worship together. Please rise in body or in spirit for our opening hymn, number 56, Bells in the High Tower. You may be seated. Now I would invite forward Kay Bennett to share with us the morning's poem.
Miracles by Walt Whitman. Why, who makes much of a miracle? As to me, I know of nothing else but miracles. Whether I walk the streets of Manhattan, or dart my sight over the roofs of houses toward the sky, or wade with naked feet along the beach just in the edge of the water, or stand under trees in the woods, or talk by day with anyone I love, or sleep in the bed at night with anyone I love, or sit at table at dinner with the rest, or look at strangers opposite me riding in the car. or watch honeybees busy around the hive of a summer forenoon, or animals feeding in the fields, or birds, or the wonderfulness of insects in the air, or the wonderfulness of the sundown, or of stars shining so quiet and bright, or the exquisite, delicate, thin curve of the new moon in spring. These, with the rest, one and all, are to me miracles, the whole referring, yet each distinct and in its place. To me, every hour of the light and dark is a miracle. Every cubic inch of space is a miracle. Every square yard of the surface of the earth is spread with the same. Every foot of the interior swarms with the same. To me, the sea is a continual miracle. The fishes that swim, the rocks, the motion of the waves, the ships with men in them. What stranger miracles are there?
Thank you, Kay. Good King Wenceslas has long been one of my favorite Christmas carols. The images and the lyrical poetry of John Mason Neal, the hymnist who wrote the carol in 1853, I always found compelling and immediately effective. I always liked it. Good King Wenceslas looked out on the feast of Stephen when the snow lay round about, deep and crisp and even. Well, as I grew older, I came to appreciate the legendary Reverend Howard Thurman's observation that it is actually after the star disappears and the shepherds and the magi all go home that the true work of Christmas begins, finding the lost, healing the wounded, and rebuilding a broken world. So it is on the day after Christmas that Wenceslas gathered his faithful page and went forth into the ever-present storm outside to serve his people. And it was by virtue of his noble character thus portrayed that we all regard him today. Well, upon first hearing, the plot of this carol might be a bit tricky to follow. But the gist of it is that a princely figure, Wenceslas, spots a poor man who is gathering winter fuel, firewood. Wenceslas asks the page about the man and is told where the man lives. And the two of them set off to offer the man a hearty meal and firewood to help him through the long winter. The trek to the man's dwelling was difficult in the bitter winter colds. And the page that came with Wenceslas was daunted by it. Wenceslas encouraged his page to literally follow in his footsteps in the snow to minimize the cold's bite while walking. Following his leadership, they offer a blessing to someone else, which in turn enriches the life of all who offer from what they have to give. But like many of the stories of this season, it is sometimes difficult to distinguish factual detail from legendary narrative. Wenceslas was a duke of Bohemia rather than a king, though there are accounts of his charitable kindness. The specific tale described in the song may or may not have happened, and if something like it did transpire, there is no way of knowing whether it was on December 26, which is the feast of St. Stephen, the first Christian martyr. The casual reference to the feast of St. Stephen meant it could be sung as a hymn in church on that day of observance. Wenceslas became venerated as a martyr and a saint almost immediately after his death. Within a few decades, several biographies had been written about the man, which had a powerful influence on the high Middle Ages, a person whose power stems from great piety and sovereign vigor. The lyrics to Good King Wenceslas were written in 1853, but its melody is much older, a 13th century tune in praise of the blossoming spring. Well, the 19th century was a period of rapid social and political change in Western Europe. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, drawing people off the countrysides and into the cities. In America, settlers were sweeping across the country, building canals and turnpikes, clearing forests and building up the land. And they were expanding the franchise, allowing the property, those without property far more autonomy and political power than they had ever had been granted before anywhere else on earth. People like the transcendentalists Margaret Fuller and Ralph Waldo Emerson and others began drafting essays on women's rights, the rights of non-Europeans, civil disobedience, the abolition of slavery, and other social blights. It was in this context that John Mason Neal wrote this famous hymn. And there were others writing in a similar vein. One of them was Charles Dickens. His well-known fable, A Christmas Carol, was published in 1843. Probably most of all of us have heard of George C. Scott's adaptation and several others of Bob Cratchit, The Ghosts of Christmas Past, Present, and Future, and the miserly Ebenezer Scrooge. Charles Dickens was the most popular author of his day. His stories all describe the social and economic upheaval in the mid-19th century England, its painful personal and psychological consequences, and the perseverance of some diligent souls who make the best of it against great odds. He was a fierce critic of the pervasive poverty and social stratification of Victorian society. It's worth noting that Charles Dickens in those years regularly attended a Unitarian church there in London. Such churches were modern in that they affirmed modern analytical biblical scholarship and textual criticism. These churches were scientifically aligned, such that his contemporary, the poet Robert Browning, wrote of him that Mr. Dickens is an enlightened Unitarian. He had little taste for Roman Catholicism, for spiritualism, or 19th century evangelicism, which he considered to be extremes of Christianity that limited one's personal expression while clouding their reason. However, he was tolerant of all those religious views when held by others. And as anyone can read, his liberal UU views sprinkled throughout his books and his stories, not only in A Christmas Carol. Well, now, the birth of the prophet Jesus, as outlined in the gospel accounts, is pure myth. And as myth, it does not rise or fall on account of the facts. Western heroes tend to be born of humble origin and lowly circumstance, unlike those of the East who, like the Buddha, Confucius, or Lao Tzu, were royalty or people of high professional stature. And remember, in myth, all aspects of the story are happening all of the time. The holy birth was not a one-time event. Our cultural salvation is coming to birth right now in all the corners of the earth. The archetype, of course, of such a birth is that of Jesus. In the account written by Matthew, it is the baby and his parents who were political refugees in flight from Galilee to Egypt, pausing just long enough for the child to be delivered. As myth, though, we must remember, Jesus is being born and reborn every minute. It is not a one-time event, but a continuing event. In the words of the great Unitarian religious educator Sophia Lyon-Fahs, each night a child is born is a holy night. Fathers and mothers, sitting beside their children's cribs, feel glory in the sight of a new life beginning, a time for singing, a time for wondering, a time for worshiping. the innocence, the hopefulness, the inherent kindness of children. Here lies the redemption of the world. And this is the message at the heart of Christmas. For human beings, children are our light in the darkness, our bit of green amid the wet and gray of December. They remind us of our truest values in engaging our hearts. The cardinal virtues of hope, faith, love, and forgiveness are stronger in the average child than in most adults. And these virtues are what save us and save humanity too. As it says in the first letter of John, chapter 4, a favorite passage of the old Universalists and often emblazoned across their altars, love one another, because love is from God. God is love, and those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them. These simple words are the heart of Christmas and the heart of Christianity. Indeed, they are the heart of all religion and in the heart of every child. So let Christmas be a wonderful celebration of life, of love and joy, but also let it be a reminder of all the ways that we are called to these virtues every day, every hour of our lives. And by living them out in our daily lives, we bring the meaning of Christmas to its ultimate, most holy expression. So may it be. Amen.